welcome to Fafanua Afrika. Good afternoon. Now, every year, millions of Nigerian young people sit for the UTME hoping for one thing: admission. But getting into a Nigerian university isn't simply about writing an examination and getting a score. We have cut-off marks, institutional requirements, available spaces, and policies all designed to balance merit with issues like geography and educational disadvantage. These are all factored in. And that creates a difficult question. When two candidates compete for one university place, what should ultimately determine who gets the seat? Should it be the person with the higher score? Should we consider where a student comes from and the educational opportunities they've had? And if we're making access easier, why are we still concerned about students being inadequately prepared? Today on Fafanua Afrika, we're asking, who really gets into a Nigerian university? Is the system fair? And what would a better admission system look like? I'm your host, Jane. Do join us on this conversation. Welcome back. You're still watching Fafanua Afrika. Now, like I said before, a quick break, we're talking about the admissions process and the access into universities in Nigeria. We have a studio full of young Nigerians. We have students, we have young entrepreneurs, we have professionals having this conversation with us today. Now, joining us are also some experts in the educational system, I might say. We have Mr. Jacob Sule. He's the Executive Director for iRead Initiative. Lovely to have you with us, Mr. Sule. We also have Yomi Fahimi, practitioner and researcher, HR and change management. And last but not least, we have Mr. Alex on here in the studio with us. He is the CEO of EduCare and an education reform advocate. And like I said, my studio guests, young advocates and students. Now together, we're all going to unpack today's conversation. Welcome once again to Fafanua Afrika. Okay, now I want to start with Mr. Sule, if you can hear me. For the average Nigerian student watching us, how does the journey from writing UTME to actually getting the university admission actually work?
Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone listening, or good afternoon. The journey is actually one that is quite a bit. First, you have to go through the WAEC exam or the NECO exams, and you must have obtained minimum of 5 credits in both mathematics and English language. And after that, you then proceed to take the UTME exams, which ideally has some specific cutoff that you must get, which is either 140 or 100 for those who are seeking admissions into polytechnics. And after that, you then go through post-UTME, which are mostly conducted by universities. And interestingly, Jamb has given universities the privilege or opportunity to conduct as many post-UTMEs as they can, and also note for us absentees, those names must be sent to Jamb. When you go through all of this process, Jamb now sits as the regulator to decide. Jamb with other universities and rectors decide what is the bench floor, that is the benchmark for who gets into a spot. When that is decided, the university themselves now have to walk through their own quota system. For example, Jamb could say for the next coming year, the admission cutoff is 150 or whatever you. That does not mean that you need to score 150 to get into some of the universities. What that means is that when you score that 150, candidates who score below that 150 will not be considered for admissions. Universities have the discretion to then set the bar higher to decide this is what we want. And that's what we've seen across board in most federal institutions and premier universities. Having said that, students have a duty to then upload their O-level results to what is called the CAPS system. That is the duty in which students owe themselves. When that process is done and O-level results have been uploaded, the university's admission officers, which is most likely the head of the university, maybe the vice chancellor, will then go through the process of saying, having obtained 5 O-level credits, these candidates can be recommended for admissions. That recommendation has to go through Jamb, and Jamb in its turn now notifies the candidate on whether or not you've been considered for admission. Now, there's a catch. When a candidate is recommended for admission, the candidate has a timeline of 2 weeks to either accept or reject that admission. In the event that a candidate fails to accept the admission, the candidate automatically loses that spot. But in the CAP system, it comes with a label that says candidate was offered an admission but did not consider it. So that's like a summary of the entire process. So it's not something that is done in isolation. Jamb works very closely with the universities to make sure that candidates who are qualified, while also paying attention to those from less advantaged communities or areas and states, are also considered in making sure that people are admitted into universities. The last piece is we have seen over the years that admissions are mostly not entirely on merit because of the diversity in Nigeria. You have to consider those on merit. You have to look at federal character principle and also those from educationally less advantaged states. So that's how admissions into tertiary institutions in Nigeria have been conducted over the years in collaboration with institutions and also the Joint Admissions Matriculations Board. Okay,
thank you so much for breaking that down. Now, if you just joining us, Mr. Sule was just breaking down the process from secondary students getting admission into a university. Now, my next question is to Mr. Onya here in the studio with us. I want to ask, now, you've heard what he has said, and obviously I believe you're familiar with the system as well. Do you think that this process is fair?
Originally, the process design is designed to be fair. But, you know, over the years, because of the demand, you notice that there's a lot of corruption that comes into the process. Like, for instance, the ideal design of the quota system is to be able to allow both the educationally disadvantaged and the advantaged have like a balance, basically for equity. But you could see that, I mean, the population then and now is different, right? And the demand is a lot more higher. So because of that, you realize that the current system needs a lot of reevaluation and most likely a change. Because sometimes you see somebody score like 320. I know Jamb had just 1 year validity. You score 320 with all the efforts to get into, let's say, medicine, because you are from an educationally advantaged state. And you see somebody scoring like 260, getting a spot before you. So why you are trying to create equity, you are punishing a lot of innocent children. So I think it has kind of outlived its time. A lot of improvements needs to happen. Even the post-UTME, the first person that did it was Nebo, Professor Nebo in UNN, which the idea was to be able to reduce cultism and reduce crime so that you can be able to stop. Because, you know, once you have children with higher intellectual capabilities, you seem to have like a much saner school. But if you have people with lower intellectual capabilities, they tend to create more distraction. So you needed to sieve people. So at the end of the day, that was the original intent. But what you can now see is that a lot of people are doing post-UME, not even understanding the purpose. And even inside the post-UME, they see a lot of fraud. So I think some of these things, either it goes back to the original design, or it has to be completely evaluated or probably overhauled. So that's what I think about the current system.
Okay. I've actually loved hearing that from you. I want to actually throw a second question to you. You've talked about it being reformed, overhauled. What would you, it has me thinking. You talked about, you know, they're trying to create equity, right? But do you think we're trying to create an equality of opportunities or an equality of outcome? Because if we look at it, there is no equality. If somebody is already educationally disadvantaged and you are throwing them into university with somebody who is, as we say, educationally advantaged, what equality have we created?
Yes, so like I said, these things have outlived their purpose. So for me, they need to be completely overhauled. And why I'm saying it is that, you know, why we do assessments like Jamb is to be able to create what we call a standard of excellence. So we expect that you should have gone through a system like your 6-year system or a 9-year system, right? And you come to take an assessment. So if there are gaps, it is always important to address the gaps and don't punish the innocent, hardworking children, so that we can have a country whereby people can actually put in effort, and based on the outcome of their effort, they can actually move to the next step. So for the government, what I would recommend is putting a lot more attention on the educationally disadvantaged areas, support them with more funding, more resources, push them up. Don't try to push people down to be able to try to support people. So when you do that, there can now be fairness, because we want a situation whereby students are preparing, studying with a clear understanding that their efforts will pave their way. This is the kind of country we need, whereby a child of nobody, right, can, in the end, through efforts, resilience, they can actually become somebody. So this is the kind of thing that I believe we should be able to do.
Okay, thank you once again, Mr. Onya. Now, my next question is to Mr. Fafanua, if you can still hear us. I'm thinking, right, we've talked about people educationally less advantaged areas, and over the years, we've seen the cutoff drop. I'm sure that when I wrote Jamb, the cutoff that it is now, I can't even imagine the numbers I'm hearing, because my father would not let me come home with that kind of result, right? Why do you, now, despite that cutoff, we still see students struggling. We still have people not meeting that cutoff. And I'm talking both in educationally advantaged areas and the educationally disadvantaged areas. So why do you think we're still seeing this struggle despite the standard being dropped?
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks to all the previous speakers. I think it's important for us to speak and situate the issues very well. Jamb is not a qualification exam. Jamb is a ranking exam. So when we say brilliant people come through Jamb, less brilliant people don't come through Jamb, we're mixing it up. In Nigeria, the qualification exam that shows that you are qualified to go to higher institution is WAEC, is NEPCO, is NIBS, and NAPTEP. Those are the qualifications exam that shows who is qualified, that shows competence, that shows knowledge. That's one side. Now, what the process now says is that if you are now qualified, we don't, I mean, the Jamb was not, we didn't always have Jamb. Because we didn't have enough space in the universities, a decision was taken that we need to rank people so that we can determine who should go where. Remember, they're already qualified. So we're not looking for competence at that point. We're just saying, oh, in this classroom, you have Steve Jobs, you have Albert Einstein, you have Elon Musk, but there are only two seats. So you say, let's create a system to rank these outstandingly brilliant people and determine who gets those 2 slots. That's part of the reasons why there is a Jamb examination. And so that's where we came from. We did it. So when people say, oh, the cutoff mark for one place should show that those people are not brilliant. No, you are using the wrong examination to measure something, right? One of the biggest errors we make in measurement and standard in education is when you use a ranking examination to replace a qualification exam. Let me just make that clear. The other thing I want to mention, because your question is strictly about quota system, about education disadvantaged states, and also about catchment. Please note, every federal system, and that's where this is not an educational issue. This is a national issue. Every federal system in the world creates a sort of affirmative action. I teach in North America in the last couple of years. There are students I take in my school because of where they came from or because of their background. Because all federal systems have a form of affirmative action. The USA has a form of affirmative action. Of course, there was a recent court judgment that negated that. So every federation has a sort of quota system. I mean, there are people that have become justices of the US Supreme Court that came to law school via affirmative action. So it's part of our civics. It's part of the federal system we have created. The second thing I want to mention, and it's good for us to be very objective in analysis, Every Nigerian child has a right to go into a university by merit. So it's open. 40% thereabout is open to everyone. The next category is what is called catchment. Every state in Nigeria has its catchment benefits. So when people say, and then you have a third category of the disadvantaged state, which is just specific states. So I am from Ondo State, for example. There are universities that are catchment for Ondo where you have lower marks. So, for example, if you go to Federal University of Technology, Korea, you're going to see a lot of people from Delta State. Why? Because Delta State is a catchment for Federal University of Technology, Korea. But if I go to University of Calabar, that Ondo State boy that was able to get lower marks to get to Akure will not get to Calabar with that lower marks because it's not the catchment state. So we always seem to present it as if some states are benefiting. All states can benefit from the merit list. All states benefit from the catchment list. All states in Nigeria. The only place where there's a difference is what is called the educational disadvantaged states. There is a process in Nigeria for a state to apply to get on that list. So if you feel your state is educationally disadvantaged, then why are you not applying to be on that instead of blaming those already on the list? Because at the end of the day, and let's be very sincere, remember, the people that are on the educational disadvantaged list have already qualified with Jamb or WAEC. The question is space. So we're not saying, oh, if somebody will score 250, they should not go and study medicine, or why somebody should score 320. No, they are already qualified. It was just a ranking exam that said this one should come before this. So when we look at that from that point of view, we must ask ourselves, if we want to remain a federation, then we must know some of the things you do to make a constitution stand is to have a quota system that enables adequate representation. I attended a federal government college where we had children who came in as students that had lower marks than those of us from many of the states that they said are more education advantageous. But you see, part of my development and part of one of the things I'm most grateful for is the fact that I had an opportunity to be in a school with people that were from the 19 states of Nigeria. I learned that there were tribes that I never knew. So it's not just going to university, it's not just becoming a doctor, it's not just becoming an engineer, a lawyer. It's also you knowing the difference in culture between somebody from Wukari or somebody from home. For example, I really did not know before I went to Federal Government College of Ogbomoso that there were Christians who were Muslims. I didn't know. So part of what I now realized getting there is that I didn't know that there were people from the north who were not Hausa or Fulanis. I didn't know about the Jukuns. I didn't know about that. So part of what you do, part of what quota system does is to create a more rounded citizen that understands the difference between people and know how to relate with it. If you're a doctor and you say you are the best and you attended Unilag or LASU or you attended UNN and everybody is from your state because they are all brilliant, and then you now have to go and practice in Jukun land or you have to go and practice in Doma land, you're going to struggle. How will you, for example, as a lawyer, know how to deal with a divorce case when there are parts of the country where the culture says they practice Yamse culture of marriage, which means that if I marry somebody in a family as a man, my sister must marry somebody in that place. So if I divorce my wife, my sister must also divorce the husband. That's their culture. So you're a lawyer that is got posted there, maybe through NYSC, or you're going to work there, and you have a brief to do divorce, and you are excited and say, oh, let's do divorce. But you did not know that there is Yamse that says, if you win this divorce, his sister will have to come back.
Thank you
That's
so much,
what you gain from federal systems, and why we must recognize, appreciate what we have.
Yes, thank you so much for contributing so richly to this part of the conversation. Now, we have young Nigerians in the studio with us. We have students, we have entrepreneurs, and I want to get their take, right? And the part of the conversation that I want to pull you guys into is, as I asked Mr. Famemi, we've seen a drop in the cutoff mark, right? And Mr. Famemi says that it's just a ranking, it is not an assessment of your qualification, right? Do we agree? Young people, do we agree?
My name is Adegbe Bukunlua. I don't agree.
Speak up?
I said my name is Adegbe Bukunlua, and I said I don't agree with the fact that Jamb is just ranking, not to assert qualification. So, okay, if I am being ranked and then I apply for a school, and then in Jamb's ranking, you are telling me I don't fit to study the course I want to study. Mind you, we said WAEC has already qualified that I am fit to study what I chose to study in that particular university. But Jamb's ranking now says I am not fit to study what I want to study. Is there not like a disparity in what WAEC is proving to what WAEC stands for and what Jamb stands for? And that's where the confusion comes in. And then my WAEC result is no longer relevant. It has proven useless because Jamb's ranking says I'm not fit to study that course. And then students will not be facing identity crisis. They will be doubting themselves. Then there's the problem of emotional stress, intellectual stress as well. I'm applying again next year, trying to meet the cutoff that this particular university requires of me for Jamb's ranking. It is not tallying. There are disparities in what Jamb's ranking stands for.
Thank you so much, Ibukun. Now, I want to, before you speak, I want to ask, again, I'm coming back to the admission threshold being dropped. Did that happen? Why do you think that happened? What does that say of your generation? If your threshold is, what, 50 to 100 points lower, what does that say about your generation?
Honestly, I feel, my name is Omitogomeran, and honestly, I feel like our generation has not really taken our educational factor very seriously. Because I remember as of 2023, when I graduated from secondary school, when I was writing Jamb that time, our cut-off mark was about 250, 10 times in university. But as of now, the cut-off mark is 220. And it's only one school that has that as their cut-off mark. And that's Pan Atlantic University. They're the only school that their cut-off mark is 220. Every other university, Unilag, University of Ibadan, University of Nigeria, their cut-off mark starts from 200 downwards. For my university, Lagos State University, our cut-off mark is 195. And I feel like every year it is dropping. Why? Because the students that we have are not putting in as much effort as they should to get into university. A lot of people are saying, under the influence that, education is scam. You don't really need it. But then what do you mean by education is scam? There are a lot of people who have made themselves through education. A lot of people that we see in our higher institutions in the country, how did they get themselves there? Was it just because of their plain wisdom or knowledge or understanding? You can have understanding, you can be smart, you can have wisdom, but if you do not take the necessary steps, like having a solid education background, you cannot get to some certain extent in life. So I feel like the fact that our our cut-off marks keep dropping is a very big disadvantage for us students, and it's not going to get better.
I want to, you can give the mic to her. Right, now she's saying that it's a very big disadvantage. Is it a disadvantage that the government has imposed on you, or is it a reflection of your current intellectual capacity?
I guess some of you already know where I will come from in this regard, because my name is Uche Jumbo, by the way. So every time on this show, I always stated that these things don't just come. They are symptoms, but they are root causes, just like you have malaria. And then instead of you treating the malaria itself, you're treating headache, you're taking paracetamol. The malaria will keep coming back. So there's a root cause to our educational system. It lacks standard. We don't approach education holistically. I said, when we were talking about the election thing some weeks back, I said, people don't just wake up and decide to be good citizens at 25 or decide to be good leaders at 25. You build that civil consciousness from when they are children while they are going to school. So you don't just teach them to vote, but you teach them proper leadership. That same thing applies to education. Go to multiple public schools. Just go and see the state of public schools in Nigeria. It is nothing to write them about. And even some private schools. I was at a particular private school recently. Imagine a secondary school does not even have. You say you have science lab, and there's nothing that indicates that this is a science lab. Or even primary school, no single chart on the wall. So it's not about you, a teacher just coming to teach and they're learning and they're receiving. No, everything that happens in that environment is education itself. So the standard of education in our country has dropped so much that people, Jamb does not, we don't need to get to 18 or 20 or even 16 before we are able to qualify for a particular exam or for a particular role. What happens after the admission itself? Are we properly prepared? So I don't think it's a generational thing. I think it is the educational standard that has dropped, and the system needs to, like he said, it needs a total overhaul. It needs to be properly reformed. The curriculum needs to be looked into, and then there has to be some level of standard to be brought into our educational system. And by doing that, I believe that we can prepare people not just to pass exam and gain admission, but to also be learned for life itself. There's something that I call sharing education for life and learning. So it's not just for us to go read and pass exams, but because of the education that we have received, that we did not just pass through school, but school itself passed through us. We become better people for ourselves. Even the educationally disadvantaged people that you are talking about, okay, what happens when they get that admission? What sustains them for the next 4 years? If they cannot really receive it properly for the last 6 or 12 years that they've been in school, what happens during the 4 years and even after the 4 years? So that means everything a lot of things that we do in the country is performative. Let it just be that we're doing it and we're not actually intentional about it and getting good results from it.
Okay.
Yeah, so before we
sorry, let's hear Mr.
I wanted us to give you a different perspective so that I can also help strengthen our conversation. First of all, you need to understand why did they lower the cutoff mark. If you can trace back a bit, let's say 6, 7, 8 years ago, or even 10 years ago, right? For you to get medicine in maybe UNN or some of these universities, probably like a 280 in Jamb can actually get you medicine. Do you know today that a 330 can't get you a medicine? So it's not really about, so first of all, you need to know why. So for me, the standard actually went higher in some courses. Now, a lot of us study for survival. Courses like nursing that used to be an ordinary course is now, I mean, even a 300, you may even struggle to get nursing. Medicine is a lot tougher. Some engineering courses is a lot tougher. So now, why did they do it? I think it's because of complete shift. There are some courses nobody wants to study, things like education. Nobody wants to be a teacher. So because of that, that's even why they even remove maths. They are trying to remove possible bottlenecks that could encourage people to be able to go into education. Why? Because teachers are the worst paid people in Nigeria. You can be a teacher for 35 years, you can't even buy a tire. So they lowered it for those courses people are not interested in, but they made it tougher. So in the real sense, it actually didn't go lower. It actually went higher for those high demand courses and went lower for the ones that people are not interested in.
Okay, let's hear from Precious.
Yeah.
My name is Precious Ladoko. So I have a lot to say concerning this from a personal experience and from my siblings and baby cousin. But I'm just trying to say is that, like Ibukun has said, Jamb and WAEC, I think those body of education system has to come together and tell us why they are giving us two different things, saying two different things. Because at the long run, let's look at it, let's come back to reality. Some people that are in polytechnic and college of education, when we look back at it, it is not their choice to be in that university. It is Jamb. Because some people don't want to go back and rewrite UTME. And after UTME, there's something called post-UTME again. So that's for the initial school you are going to. So I think the body of Nigeria education, maybe the Federal Ministry of Education, every one of them has to come together. Because if we look at it, we're making it feel like our generation is unserious at this point. And whereby some courses are being graded high and some courses are being put down and being neglected or looked down at. Everybody has their choices. I have a friend that is into education and she loves it so much. That's her passion. She wants to be a professor, a teacher. And some people want to be a doctor. We are all different. And when we look at it intellectually, most of us, our capacity is different. I used to say back then in school, I'm not a very intelligent student. but I know my capacity. I know where I can go to. I know my limits. But so now, at this point, I think it's not that Jamb should be scrapped, but they have to come back to the situation whereby they are going to help and foster the education system. And when we look back to that, it's when we now go back to the secondary part, most schools are lacking facilities, not even facilities, teachers. When you look at it, core members, I'm a core members. Some of my core members that we went to camp together, because I was a Lagos corper in Ondo State. Some of my friends, my roommates are now teachers in Ondo State, and they are taking 4 subjects. Why? The education system is already like decaying.
So I believe this is a conversation, right?
Yes.
So why I understand that there is a lot of decline, but trust me, let's work with a little bit data. The past 2 years in Jamb has been the best in the history of Jamb. This recent WAEC result that was released, this was the best WAEC result ever in the history of WAEC. That was why WAEC had to cut down and punish everybody.
But sir, this same best result.
No, I will tell you why.
Students that did exams overnight.
Hold on. I'm not saying that the education system is improving, but the generation of the people now and the privilege they have. For instance, we have AI. AI has disrupted anything called learning. You understand? This is a rare privilege that other generations never had. So for the generation itself, even with the level of disadvantage that they're experiencing, they are still the best. It's about the people, individual factor now, not the systemic factor. Yes, the systemic factors has to be critically addressed.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. But what I'm basically, and another thing you need to understand is, the max admissions they can give each year is 700,000. And check the numbers. Last year, was it not 1.9 that wrote the exam? Yes. So that means how many? 1.2?
1.2 million people.
Yes, are destined to write again. Right? So now they have to keep manipulating these numbers. Private universities are way more expensive. Right? A lot of families can't afford it. So the point is this, normally you have to define what you dream of a society. If you say you want a society whereby excellence has a chance and we have the best people in best places, then you have to be able to remove all the catchment and all those things.
Okay, sir. Sorry, I want us to just hold that thought. The conversation is getting more intense, sweeter, as they would say in the studio, but we have to go on a quick break. We'll be right back. You're still watching Fafanua Afrika. Welcome back. This is still Fafanua Afrika. Now, before the break, we were talking about Jamb, the merit system, the quota system, and how are young Nigerians getting into universities. Now, I want to look back. Please don't forget that we have Mr. Fafanua and Mr. Sule with us still on the conversation. I want to throw this to Mr. Sule. Right now, you hear a lot of young Nigerians talking about, oh, I didn't get into university because I didn't meet the cutoff mark. But we have polytechnics and we have college of educations. We have colleges of education. We had Precious here in the studio tell us how, some people that are in polytechnic is because, well, they didn't have a choice. Why are young Nigerians running away from polytechnics?
Thank you so much. Before I respond to the question, I want to clarify a misconception that we have been running with. Jamb has not lowered the standard. I want to be very clear on that. As a matter of fact, in 2023, the cutoff mark was about 140 compared to what we have right now. But the issue is there's this perception of Nigerians that if an exam is 400%, why are we considering 150 or 140 as the benchmark? So we need to clarify and put this conversation in perspective. Jamb has not lowered the perspective. It has continued to raise the bar. And I also want to clarify the position which my colleague had shared that WAEC had deliberately wanted to fail people. No, WAEC released a statement that there were reports of malpractice, and that's why I decided to make that position to review and withhold some results. So I wanted to be very clear in this perspective. Now to the question on why Polytechnic or what have you. The issue is that when you look at the carriage capacity of our tertiary institutions, not every applicant or candidate can get a spot into a university. We have about 1,700 plus universities, less than 2,000 universities in the whole of Nigeria. And for every year, at least just this past year, we had about 2 million candidates who had applied for a spot in all of these tertiary institutions. Now, the challenge is this: when you look at the data, Jamb has a specific threshold of candidates in which they can admit. I think sometimes in last year we had about 900,000 capacity, but unfortunately the entire space did not carry everyone. And if you look at the briefing which iRead authored, we said about 700 plus seats left unused. What does that mean? It means that candidates who were seeking admissions into some of these tertiary institutions could not get a spot despite scoring the required point of 140 or 150. Now, why are they going into polytechnics, or how did my colleague there say it? We need to be very clear on this. Polytechnics sometimes may not be the end goal of many applicants. It does not mean that the quality of education in our polytechnics are substandard. I understand the public bias, the public perception about, oh, this candidate has gone to a polytechnic and what have you, and we have to treat them with a little bit of carefulness and all that. But I want to clarify that candidates who eventually get into polytechnics, they have the choice by themselves to determine and say, this is a path I want to follow, and we can build on it. Now, there was something in which I think the current Minister for Education had clarified, making deliberate efforts to ensure that the dichotomy between HND candidates and BSc candidates is being set apart. What does that mean? They're trying to bridge the gap and bridge the discrimination between candidates who are seeking admissions into this university. But the reality is not everybody in Nigeria can get admissions into our universities. We don't have the capacity right now to admit every candidate seeking admissions into universities. But what can the Federal Ministry of Education do, which I think they have already started doing, is to fix the institutional capacity itself. How can they fix this? Build more universities, give approval to more universities. I understand that the Federal Ministry of Education had done an audit recently to really understand how to restructure this university. That's one thing in which we can look at as well. Then they need to also review this issue of administrative barriers. Barriers in the sense that oftentimes most HND graduates or ND graduates find it very challenging to get a foot into maybe the National Youth Service Program. So all of these things need to be resolved, and also to make sure that this discrimination against persons who have gone through polytechnics or colleges of education is brought to an end, and then we can have an harmonized system. Okay. But the reality is not everybody who seeks an admission into a university can get a spot, and that's why we have colleges of education and HNDs for candidates who are seeking tertiary institutions or admissions in Nigeria.
Thank you so much for that contribution, Mr. Sule. Now, my next question is to Mr. Farami. We've heard what Mr. Sule said. Not everybody that's going to apply into a university will get in. My question is, why do we not have a country where young people actually apply to a polytechnic as a first choice? Why is the university the end goal of a 6-year secondary education? Mr. Farami, please.
Okay, thanks. Great question. Thanks for all the contribution. There is a model called school to work model. I mean, because university higher education is both a means and an end. It means to the extent that it takes you to the labor market. So you go to the university or the polytechnic because you intend to get a career afterwards. So that's what makes it a means and not just an end. That, okay, I just want to go to school for the sake of going to school. Now, because it's a means, people will look at the end and determine what means to take. So, for example, if I want to fly from Canada to Nigeria, if I want to go from Canada to Nigeria, there are various means. I can walk. but I can't walk on water. I can fly. I can take a train. There are various means to move between Lagos and Enugu. You can fly, you can go by road and all of that. Now, when you remember you are going to Enugu to go and do a competition, then you ask yourself, what's the best means to get there? So the Nigerian child has looked at the market and said, what is the best means to get me a job or to get me a career? And based on what he has seen, a university education is the best means, and that's why that will be their first choice. Now, is it the fault of the student? No, it's not the fault of the student. It's just because of that's the way the market has been designed. Does the government have a responsibility to change that? Yes, I believe they have a responsibility, and some countries have tried to do that. In the UK, one of the things they did was to change some of their polytechnics to become universities. So rather than have so many polytechnics, what they did was that they created an approval process where a polytechnic can apply to become a university. So you don't have that dichotomy. If everybody wants to go to university, let them go there. What some other countries do, like in Canada, is the fact that they started calling them colleges. So those colleges, I mean, I teach in a college, for example. I have certificate students that I teach. I have diploma students that I teach. I have degree students that I teach. I have postgraduate students that I teach. And it's a college, right? I have postgraduate students. I have degree students. I have diploma students, and I also have certificate students. I don't know why Nigeria cannot explore that possibility. I mean, why can't Yaba Tech, Ibadan Poly, Kaduna Poly, for example, and some of them already have, they have diploma programs, they have certificate programs, and they have why can't we use that model if that's what people want? One of the things we must also think about in Nigeria is the question of job development. In a normal economic systems, you will need more polytechnic graduates than university graduates. My role was to develop schools, hospitals in the Niger Delta for over 10 years. I will have one engineer who sits in Lagos supervising 10 projects for me, one engineer supervising 10 schools, community, or just one engineer. But I need an inspector per project. I need 10 inspectors. Those inspectors are OND holders of civil engineering from polytechnics. So look at that ratio. I have one engineer who has a BSc in engineering, civil engineering, that supervises 10 projects. I need 10 civil inspectors who have OND. Then I need for each site a minimum of 10 masons who build the houses. Those are the people that are the craft people, who they call the bricklayer. So you have one engineer, 10 OND holders, 100 masons. That is the way most production processes work.
Okay.
And therefore, we need more people at those lower levels. But the only thing that will change it is if we do not reward them by paying them well, then nobody is going to go there.
Okay,
because they just realize it doesn't make sense.
Thank you for that contribution, Mr. Fafanua. Now, as we round up, we've heard the quota system, we've heard the university and polytechnics. So I have two questions, and I want to throw my penultimate question to the young people in the house. It's a very straightforward one. Would you go to a polytechnic over a university?
Okay, so my name is
Just in 30 seconds.
Olishaga. Honestly, I would not consider going to a polytechnic because there is an issue in the job market. There's this kind of stereotype that's what's the name employers already have. There's a kind of stereotype that they have that if this person is coming from a university, and it also happens not only from university and polytechnics, there's still differentiation between a private uni and a public university. There's still that one. So there's a difference between a UNILAG holder and someone that is coming from Covenant University to present their degrees. There is, when somebody sees this person from Covenant, because of the way they market themselves, it is much more easier for them to say, oh, this person, I'm going to go for this institute.
So you think that the drawback is the stereotype?
Is the stereotype.
Okay, I want to hear from...
I will not want to read.
Sorry, I actually want to hear from Uche, because Uche did go to a polytechnic. So I need you to give us a lived experience in 30 seconds or
Well,
less.
I went to a polytechnic, and I must say it's one of the best things. I did go to university after that too, but I did that because I heard a lot of people who have experienced the job market. I even did a story, because I read mass communication. I did a story about the disparity between HND and BSI. That was when I was even crying. I'm like, why do I have to still do a PDG program, a postgraduate program, after my HND education just because I want to convert to BSc and before I can even go for my master's. So the system itself has created that. You go to the university, it's like you have a success story. You go to a polytechnic, it's what you don't have a choice. It's what happened. Life has happened to you, so just take it like that. So I think that is why a lot of people rather prefer I mean, I later went to university because I couldn't deal with the, oh, you went to a polytechnic. And even I've seen a job market, a particular vacancy that if you have HND, there's a particular amount that you are being paid, and if you have BSc, there's a particular amount that you are being paid, especially in the banking system. I have friends in that system who have experienced it. So I think the system itself has created that in our mind. There's this classism in it that we have to actually look into, and then even make the polytechnic attractive itself to make people want to go there.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, Yabatech is a great
I can only take. Okay, I will only take one more opinion. I'm so sorry, guys. We're pressed for time.
All right, thank you. My name is Sheito Ambola, and I left Lagos State Polytechnic in 2022.
Okay.
And all my years in the Polytechnic, I was already teaching in the Young Comprehensive College. I take students in the chemistry laboratory, and for real, I actually turned out students to write WAEC. And from record, that was the first time students actually get to appreciate chemistry. But then Lagos State Polytechnic, then I was studying science laboratory technology. Lagos State Polytechnic and polytechnics rather in Nigeria has something that instills the practical experience and knowledge. So Mr. Fahimi said something very profound. He said this is a national issue, not an educational issue. I don't believe my generation is not academically sound or educationally sound. I just believe that the system, whether breaking into 45% for catchment and for let the brains get it or access, I think what the government should do or what nationally we should do is that we should strengthen the base. Let's go back to the secondary schools and let students understand why they should go not just into the celebrated courses. Let them get to explore other courses. Let them look at courses like the education, like you said. Let's look at some other courses that have to do with industrial capabilities. So I want the counseling sectors in secondary schools to be strengthened. Currently, I'm back in the university, and there's just an hedge, having gone through a practical
system. Oh my God, thank you so much. Now, I'm so sorry, but as we round up, I want to hear from Mr. Onya. In terms of reforms, in 30 seconds or less, what should we do? How do we move from this point?
So I'll just actually say briefly from an employer perspective.
Okay.
So there's a reason why I would take a third class from Unilag and probably not consider a 2-1 from the Polytechnic. So the reason is, over the years, you notice that it's easier to find corruption in polytechnics. So when somebody says he has a 2-1, I don't even know how they do their rating. The chances of the person not even having the capability to communicate properly is there, right?
Okay.
But when you see a 2-2 from Unilag or from UNN, there's some level of excellence you get. And, you know, I don't have to go through everybody in a polytechnic to know who is good or wrong.
Okay.
If I've tried 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, and I could see that it's a lot of struggle, it doesn't mean there are not super brilliant people in polytechnics, but there's no point wasting my time.
Okay.
So because of that, it's easy for those kind of stereotypes to arise.
I see.
So one of the things that should happen in universities and also in polytechnic is they should fight anything called malpractice with everything in their blood. It is only when you can be able to conquer malpractice that you can automatically start increasing standard and quality.
Okay,
and once that
so
happens, it's easy for us to get more.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much. As always, it has been a rich conversation. Right now, getting into university is often presented as the finish line for a Nigerian young person. But perhaps we need to rethink that, because access without adequate preparation, as we've heard, can leave students struggling. Merit without consideration for inequality can reproduce existing advantages. And having university spaces available means little if the education system has not made those spaces equally accessible or equally desirable. So perhaps the real question isn't simply who gets admitted. It is whether Nigeria can build an education system where more young people have a fair opportunity to qualify, where admission is transparent, where merit matters, where disadvantage is addressed, and where every pathway to a meaningful career is respected, because the goal shouldn't simply be to get more young Nigerians into university. It should be to give them a fair chance to succeed once they get there. This is Fafanua Afrika. I've been your host, Ekemini Jane. Do have a lovely rest of your day.